You're listening to the wrong podcast. Topics today include roots, roost, and recruits.
Wrong!
It's the wrong podcast, but we'll make it right. Spinning the world in a whole new light. Winning wild and a little askew. And the one who's right, it might be you. It might be you.
Hi, I'm Tim. I'm here to talk about politics, culture, religion, sports, and anything else you're not allowed to talk about in polite company. Issue number 1! Shut the front door! This story comes from Sweden. There were firefighters. They were out doing firefightery things. Actually, they weren't doing firefightery things because they had time on their hands. You see, firefighters don't normally help get pets out of trees. But if they happen to have time and they happen to be there, maybe they'll help you out. And this happened in Sweden. A man's parrot had gotten out of the house and flown into a nearby tree, and the man could not get his parrot out. So the firefighters, the Swedish firefighters, they said to one another, "Here the bird, the bird," and they climbed up into the tree, and their ladders weren't tall enough to get the bird. They could not get the bird out of the tree. And when they tried to get the bird out of the tree, it said, "You feared the bird," which in Swedish is a very nasty word. Actually, it used an English word. It used an English word that starts with F that I will not use on this podcast because because my mother might hear it, and that's enough reason in itself. So this parrot swears at the firefighters. They can't get the bird because the bird is swearing at them. It's rather salty. It's like a pirate, and it's starting to get dark. They start this endeavor at like 4 p.m, and around 10 at night, the bird won't come down. And the owner of the bird says, "Well, the bird won't come down because it's dark, and they don't like flying around in the dark." And I have to say, what is going on with these firefighters? That they're there for 6 hours for this parrot. I'm telling you, the story may not be true. I have some suspicions about this story, but let's go with it. So the owner says, "Wait, I know how to get the bird down." And he gets out a pack of cigarettes, and the bird flies down to get the cigarettes. This is a very ill-tempered little parrot, I'll tell you that right now. And my biggest question about this story is, if the owner knew that the bird would come for cigarettes, why did he wait 6 hours to try it? Doesn't make any sense at all. But he's also the kind of guy who teaches his parrot to swear at firefighters and smoke cigarettes. Actually, we don't know that the bird was smoking the cigarettes. It might have been just, chewing on the tobacco. Chewing tobacco, if you will. And when I read this story, it brought to mind a parrot story I have. I don't think I've told this story here, but I tell this story frequently because it is mind-blowing. So my grandparents, they raised African gray parrots. And they would breed them and sell them to other people for money. And they had a few of them. They had 2 of them that were their pets, that were actually inside the house that they considered their pets. And one of the birds' name was Nicole. And Nicole was right next to the front door. And every time somebody would come into the house, the first thing they were told is, "Do not put your fingers in the cage. She will bite your fingers." Every time. That's what everybody heard. Don't put your fingers in the cage. Nicole would go down into the corner of the bird cage, closest to the person, and she would lie on her back, and she'd put her feet up in the air, and she'd say, "Tickle, tickle, tickle, tickle." And I saw this happen more than once. I swear to you, this is a true story. I saw it actually happen more than once. And the house guest would say, "Oh, the bird wants a tickle." And they'd stick their finger in the cage to rub the bird's tummy. And Nicole would jump up and bite them. And then say, "Ha ha, gotcha." I am not making that story up. That story is 100% more true than the Swedish firefighter story. And the bird was diabolical, right? There's no other way to put it. And the bird, of course, learned all of this from my grandfather because he was allowed to stick his fingers in the cage without getting bit. And he would tickle the bird, and occasionally he'd pull on the bird's feathers when she was molting, and occasionally he'd grab one that wasn't molting, and it would hurt the bird. And the bird would jump up, and then my grandfather would say, "Ha ha, gotcha." I don't know where to go with this story after that. Just, there's a story for you. There's two stories. There's two stories about a parrot. Enjoy. Issue number 2. What this is. As you know, I have a fascination with authoritarian religions and with non-spiritual religions. It's obvious to me that spirituality is an important aspect of most people's lives, and even if they're not religious, even if they don't believe in anything to do with the supernatural or the spiritual or the otherworldly or with God in general, they've got this hole in their lives that needs to be filled with spirituality. And so sometimes people will fill that hole with non-spiritual religions. One I've talked about frequently is civil religion. Every country on earth has this religion that's kind of devoted to the national character, and it involves hymns and pledges. You know, the national anthem of every country follows the format of their religious songs. And we have a Pledge of Allegiance that's very much like a religious oath. We have religious symbols that can't be trampled or have to be respected. That's true of every country. Another non-spiritual religion is QAnon in many ways. I'm not saying this is true of everybody who's into QAnon, but for many people who are into QAnon, it's filling a religious void. They've got secret knowledge. There's special coded language that you have to learn to get into the group, to understand what's happening. There's specific drops, of information or prophetic utterances that are meaningful to people that people try to decode. Another one is CrossFit, the cross-training routine. And I was listening to a podcast about CrossFit as a religion, and they pointed out it's right there in the name, cross. There's a cross in CrossFit. But and I'm not saying this is true of everybody who exercises or everybody who's involved in CrossFit. But for many people, they're in this community. It's a close-knit community. They're challenging one another to do hard things. They, sometimes they'll fall on the ground and they'll put their arms out in a cross shape because they're so exhausted. Sometimes they'll show off the blisters on their hands like they're the stigmata of Jesus as he was nailed into the cross. And you have to go regularly. You're part of this community. It can be a religion for some people. Well, I bring this up because I learned about this new one that is really weird. It's called Zizianism. It's the Zizians, and it's devoted to this prophet named Ziz. And it's a break off of something called rationalism. Let me tell you about rationalism first, and then we'll get into Ziz and his followers, or her followers, if you prefer. There's a tease. So rationalism, it's this thing that's kind of popular in the San Jose area. And the basic idea is we're only going to do rational things. We're going to use logic and scientific process, and we're only going to do things that make sense according to the rigors of logic and rationality. And when you read it, you're like, well, yeah, that makes sense. We should do that. I'm generally in favor of everything they're recommending we do. I want to do that too. The problem with rationality is that we are not rational people. Even if we try to be rational people, what we're really good at is making emotional decisions and then deciding that those were emotional decisions. We're excellent at that. And it's so disappointing. If you want to devote yourself to rationality, you have to recognize that you've got some blind spots and you will not make rational decisions. You will just convince yourself that you're making rational decisions. Well, the Zizians are no different. So they're part of this rationality group, and Ziz is a trans woman. He's a man who thinks or wants to be a woman, and he's a vegan. And veganism and transgenderism are an important part of this religious sect. It's really a vegan transgender breakoff of rationality. And it is very hard to understand what's going on with Zizianism because there is all kinds of coded language. You really have to dive into what these words mean and what they mean in this context. They will not make sense to you as you're reading them for the first time. And really, only the people in the group understand what's going on. One of the basic tenets of the group is that the brain is divided. And you might have heard of the right brain, left brain thing. The right brain, left brain thing is not actually as meaningful as people like to say. In fact, just last night, somebody heard that I was a graphic designer. They're like, oh, you're a left brain, I'm a right brain. And I decided not to correct him on that because I don't even remember which one is the creative one or not. Maybe that's why I don't know my right from my left. Or maybe I don't know which one's the right and left because I don't know my right from my left. True story. For another time. So they believe in this brain split, but it's not right and left brain. It's male brain and female brain. And this causes conflict with all of us. We have a right brain or a male brain and a female brain. They are constantly in conflict. And the way to resolve this conflict is to sleep with only half of your brain at a time. And this is something dolphins do. Dolphins are able to shut off half their brain so that they can continue swimming while they're sleeping and come up for air. And unfortunately, people are not able to do this. So if you encourage people to only sleep with half of their brain at a time, you're going to expose them to what's called sleep deprivation. And in very dysfunctional authoritarian groups where people get hurt, one of the first things you do is deprive them of sleep. It's the easiest way to control them. Also take away protein. Did I mention that they're a vegan group? So you have to sleep only half your brain at a time, and then everybody should be taking estrogen because estrogen is the hormone that is tied to intelligence, according to them. I have no reason to believe that estrogen is what causes intelligence, but based on the many, many poor decisions by men, they might be onto something. So these people, these Zizians, they broke away from rationalism because they didn't think they were proactive enough against threats. They firmly believe in animal protectionism. They think animals need to be defended, and the rationalists weren't doing anything about it. And then the other reason they broke off, their real concern with the lack of activism is over artificial intelligence. And Zizians believe that eventually there will be an AI that will control us. There will be a general artificial intelligence that will control everybody, and it will kill anybody who wasn't proactively helping it along in the early stages. So if you are not actively involved in trying to push AI towards general intelligence, it's too late for you. And if you're hesitant about AI, it's really too late for you because eventually the AI will come alive, it will have its intelligence, it will be all powerful, and it will kill you for your lack of faith. And so they are very much against AI, and they say it has to be destroyed right now. You know those thought experiments about would you kill baby Hitler? They're playing that out right now. Hitler is AI to them. And they're saying it's a baby right now and we need to kill it. And they have made the news because, unfortunately, over the last year and a half or so, there have been 5 murders tied to this group. They've already become violent. One of the murders was a former landlord who they got into a dispute with, and they all attacked him with steak knives, and one guy had a ninja sword. And they all attacked him, And they didn't kill him because he pulled out a gun and started shooting them, and he killed them. So they all ran off. And then later, one of the Zizians tracked him down and killed him on his own. They also killed, I believe, the parents of Ziz, of the founder. Not a great group. Not a great group at all. I don't actually recommend that you follow the tenets of Zizianism. Hey, it's time. What are the rules?
Oh, what are the rules? What are the rules? Don't touch my fries or my garden tools. Oh, what are the rules? Yeah, I got my quirks. Follow them closely and I promise it works.
I had a major rite of passage recently. The lovely Wendy, she likes to garden. She asked me to remove an 8-foot cypress tree from our yard. I love her, so I removed it for her. And I learned in removing the trunk of this tree that I never again will remove a tree trunk ever in my life. I've passed the point where it is fun or even possible. It's never been fun. Right now, it doesn't even seem possible. It was very difficult, and I learned that I'm not as strong as I used to be. This is normal. Everybody gets older. You start losing muscle mass. Because I'm losing muscle, I decided, okay, I'm going to go join a gym. I'm going to go a couple times a week for weight training. I need to make myself stronger. I'm going to go to the gym and do this. And I've been going for about a month, and I've already got a rule about the gym. This is the rule about the gym. Well, first, let me back up before I tell you about the rule at the gym. Do you know that thing that dogs do? You take the dog outside to go to the bathroom, and it's doing its business, and it stares you in the eye. It looks you in the eye while it's doing what it needs to do. And it's very uncomfortable, right? You don't want to make eye contact with a dog while it's doing that. Well, this is the way I feel about the gym. I'm doing something hard. It's awkward. I might be making a face I don't necessarily intend to make. It's difficult. I'm pushing these weights in one way or another. While I'm doing this, do not make eye contact with me. It's your job. If you're walking by, if you're nearby, if you need to cross in front of my vision, it's your job not to make eye contact with me. Don't make eye contact with people at the gym while they're pushing weights. That's the rule. It's weird. It's awkward. I don't want any part of it. Remember, I want to know what's wrong with you.
What's wrong with you?
If you'd like to submit a question, topic, or tell me how I was wrong, you can email me at listen@thewrongpodcast.com or submit a comment at my website, thewrongpodcast.com, and help me spread the wrong message. If you like what you hear, share it with your friends. And go on your little podcasting app, whatever you're using, give me a review. Reviews really help. Also, telling your friends. That really helps. Now it's time for my favorite part of the show. I was wrong.
I was wrong. Oh, I was wrong.
Listener Matt. I recommend the King James Version to all my friends who are over 400 years old. That was the best line in an episode filled with a ton of great quips. Thank you, Matt. Listener Drew. Tim, do you know how I know you're not from Australia? Your Australian accent is terrible, and you pronounce Melbourne like you live in Florida instead of Melbourne, like a real Aussie says.
To which I just have to say you're wrong. I mean, you're wrong.
I disagree, Drew. My Australian accent is excellent and hysterical. I listened to that portion of the show myself just to get a good laugh out of it. I'll concede, I might be the only person who thinks that was hysterical, but that was good enough for me. I'm here for me sometimes. This brings up another thing, though. I don't know if you saw this viral clip. There's these Australian twins. They witnessed this man on a rampage in Australia, I believe in Melbourne, as you might say, Drew. And they were describing to a reporter what they saw, and it sounded like this.
And he goes, I'll shoot you. She goes, hey, I'm here to help.
And Mum distracting him to make him look the other way, and he looked the other way, and Mum ran
into the bush behind the fence. And the guy goes to her, I'll find you and I'll shoot you. All I was thinking about when we were running,
I hope he doesn't fire.
Yeah, we were.
That's a real clip. That's really how they talk, and I have learned something about how to speak Australian from them. So here is my latest attempt. Oi. I think I know how to speak Australian now. And it must sound something like this.
Wrong!
Issue number 3. How does your garden grow? Listener Alicia writes in with a question. She says, Tim, that's because that's my name, Tim, why do California fast food workers have a higher minimum wage than others? Excellent question, Alicia. I'm so glad you came here for answers to minimum wage laws. In California, the minimum wage is $16.50 an hour. I think the federal minimum wage is like $7.50 an hour. So it's more than double than the federal minimum, $16.50 an hour, unless you work at a fast food restaurant that has more than 60 locations nationwide, or bakes its own bread, then the minimum wage is $20 an hour. Any other job, you're getting paid $3.50 an hour less than the people working at fast food restaurants. If, again, I'll repeat, if that fast food chain has more than 60 locations and does not bake its own bread. So interestingly, Panera Bread is owned by a gentleman who knew Gavin Newsom, our governor, when they were in high school, and he's been a frequent political contributor to Gavin Newsom. He owns Panera Bread, which bakes its own bread, and found itself exempt from this minimum wage hike. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Panera bakes their own bread. They get away with it. Subway, though. Subway also bakes their own bread. So they, too, don't have to pay $20 an hour to their workers. No, that's where you're wrong, actually. You're wrong. Subway has to pay their workers $20 an hour because even though they bake their own bread, they do not sell the bread as an individual item. Now, there seems to be an easy way to get around this. Okay, Subway says, we bake our own bread. We have to sell it as an individual item. We will tell people they can just buy their bread on its own, and then we don't have to pay $20 an hour. Nope, can't do that. You had to have been selling the bread as its own item, as its own individual item, at least a year before the law went into effect. Maybe it was 6 months before the law went into effect. But nobody was getting out of this, except for Panera Bread. For some reason, nobody understands exactly why bakeries are exempt from this. And things did not go exactly great for Panera Bread after this. It wasn't necessarily positive news coverage about them, and perhaps this corruption that was benefiting them and no one else with these rather strange laws. So Panera has given in, and they pay their workers $20 an hour, even though they don't have to. They do. Nobody changed the law. Panera could stop paying their workers $20 an hour if they wanted to. Now, it could be also that Panera realized that they weren't going to get the staff they wanted if they weren't paying as much as the other fast food restaurants. That could also be in play here. And I will explain all of this, why this happened. This was actually explained to me by a commentator named Jonah Goldberg, and it's not original to him. It actually starts with this guy, Frederick Hayek, who won a Nobel Prize in economics. And in his acceptance speech for the Nobel Prize, he pointed out that there's two kinds of gardens. There are English gardens and there are French gardens. French gardens are the really fancy ones. Imagine perfectly symmetrical hedges that are all trimmed the same height. Everything's laid out in exactly the right place. The bushes are trimmed into different shapes. They're boxes or they're spheres or they're cones. They're swirly. a lot of work is going into a French garden. An English garden, on the other hand, an English garden, think of The Secret Garden. Think whatever comes to mind about the movie or the books, The Secret Garden, that's the kind of garden that Hayek is talking about. It's a garden that's just growing. People have planted plants, and they're letting the plants do their own thing. Go for it, says the English gardener. Go for it. Grow however you want to grow. The only thing the English gardener is going to do is keep weeds out and keep predators out. Other than that, the plants are free to grow however they want. And hopefully the analogy is obvious to you. In economies, there are people trying to grow French gardens and there are people trying to grow English gardens. And in Hayek's opinion, and mine too, the English garden is much more appealing to the eye. And it's much more effective in economies. The problem with the French garden is that plants have their own will. And you need to constantly be pruning this garden to force it into the shape you want it to take. And the plants won't always contribute. And the trees, for sure, aren't going to grow as tall as they actually could. Because you're confining them. You're keeping them down. And I don't know if you've seen this kind of thing, where, like, there's a subdivision nearby where they've got the name of the subdivision spelled out in bushes. I think it's called Quail Run. And those bushes look cool. It's on the side of a hill, big bushes spelled into letters. Those look cool, but occasionally in those kind of bushes, you'll see that there's a gap in one of the letters. The branches aren't growing right. Something's happened, something's diseased, and the letter looks deformed. In my mind, this is no way to garden. I get what you're doing with spelling it. I get what you're doing with you're making the bush look like Bambi or Mickey Mouse or whatever. That's cool and interesting, but it's not a great plant. It's not the best kind of plant. And the reason it's not the best kind of plant is because plants don't want to look like Mickey Mouse. They don't want to look like the letter Q. They've got their own idea of how they should look. And the environment and the weather and the other kind of plants around them, those all go into what the plant wants to do. Economies are the same way. They're like gardens. And the classic sense of a French garden in an economy is communism. In communist governments, the government is forming everything. It's telling everybody what to do and how it should do it. It's saying we need more of this or that. We're going to determine what the needs of this whole economy are, and we're going to force everybody into those boxes. Socialism would be similar, but a little less than communism. And there's this idea of an industrial policy. We're going to have an industrial policy. We're going to have a policy that says what kind of industries we have and what those industries look like and what they pay and what they produce. And the problem with this kind of economy is that you are not smart enough to understand what people want or need. You cannot have enough information at your fingertips, or you can't process the information. Even if you were able to get the information, you can't process it effectively to actually know what they need. And you can't predict what they're going to need next year or 10 years from now. You can't even predict what they're going to need next month. There's millions and billions and trillions of small decisions that are being made by 8 billion people on the planet. And those small decisions are going to make much better decisions for all of those people than any small group of people trying to form a policy committee. Not a big fan of committees myself. I understand the need for them. I'm a part of some of them. But have you ever heard the thing about a camel? A camel is a horse that's been drawn by a committee. It's not all that pleasing to look at. It's not as fast. It's kind of weird. It spits. It smells bad. But it does all these things that the horse can't do, that maybe it's better. Now, there is a major economic policy that's been put forth by our president, and he ran on this idea. He said, hey, we're not going to have taxes on tips for waiters. Waiters, good news. No more federal taxes on tips. And this seems great. I'm all in favor of people not paying taxes, but why is it that the waiters don't have to pay taxes? What about the busboys and the dishwashers at the restaurant? Why are they having to pay taxes? They don't get tipped like waiters. I guess in some restaurants they might, but in general, they're getting paid an hourly wage. And those people, the busboys and the dishwashers, they're much more likely to be the people who are actually trying to make a full-time job out of this job. They're the ones who are going to stick around much longer. The waiters, it's kind of a transitory position in most restaurants. So just like the minimum wage law for fast food workers, it doesn't necessarily make sense. Why are you favoring these people but not these other people? Just because they bake bread or they happen to bring the food out to you or write down the order. Why is that the thing that causes somebody to deserve more money, that the government's going to step in and say, no, this is what we want people doing. We want people not baking bread, and we want people writing down people's food orders and talking to them. That's what's really important to us. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he was senator, he used to speak out against this kind of thing all the time. He used to speak out against industrial policy. He was in favor of open markets, of free markets, of English gardens in general. And he is part of the Trump administration. And somebody asked him about tariffs and what is going on with all the tariffs that Trump is proposing, or has not just proposed, but actually instigated. He's caused to be real. And Marco Rubio said, I'm now actually for industrial policy, as long as it's the right people who are making the decisions. This is nuts to me. This is nuts. This is not what you should be saying. First off, how do you know who the right people are? You say the right people are you, because of course you are, but how long do you think you can stay in office? Because I can promise you the history of our country tells me that you can't stay in office forever. The right people will not always be in place. So if you set up our economy around industrial policies, you can be sure that somebody's going to come along and change the policy at some point. The second thing, I've already talked about this, is you're not smart enough. You are not savvy enough to know how the economy should run. You don't know what's best for everybody. There's a long history of this. We've been studying economies for centuries. We know it doesn't actually work out if you try to manipulate it. Do you know why everything is more expensive in Hawaii? It's on an island. Good job. You're right. It is on an island. But most of the stuff that's imported from China actually has to pass by Hawaii on its way to the United States. That stuff is not allowed off the boat. Even if the boat happens to, the ship, boat, whatever you want to call it, the dinghy, the barge, the freighter, if it happens to stop in Hawaii, that stuff can't get off the ship there. It has to go to the contiguous 48 states first and be unloaded, and then shipped back to Hawaii. That's why stuff costs more in Hawaii. Not just because it's on an island, but we make it go an extra several thousand miles in both directions before it's allowed to be on that island. That is French garden stuff. It hurts the people of Hawaii for the benefit of a few people in the contiguous United States who happen to unload the ships. The longshoremen who happen to be in Los Angeles or San Diego or San Francisco or Seattle. We're benefiting those people so that all the people in Hawaii have to pay more money. That's not fair. It doesn't make any good sense. Tariffs in general are the same kind of thing. They're not fair. It protects a certain number of people. It protects these farmers, or it protects these people who make cars or widgets or whatever you want them to make. But it disfavors all of the consumers in that country. They're all having to pay extra, or they're getting worse product than they would have if you didn't have tariffs. Tariffs are French gardening. They're for the benefit of the producers rather than for the benefit of the consumers. So yes, there are Americans who will benefit from tariffs, but the vast majority of Americans will not benefit from them. They'll pay more. There's two ways to get rich. One way is to make more money. The other way, which is the way that most people have to live their lives, it's actually to cut their expenses, to buy cheaper things, to not buy as much stuff. When you do that, you're able to afford more. Your standard of living goes up because you're able to get more with the few dollars you have. When you put tariffs on people, they can't get as far as they used to on their money. You're making everybody poorer. Even though you're making a few Americans richer, most Americans are actually going to get poorer. And they're not going to get as good as stuff. We cannot grow avocados in the United States the way they can in Mexico. We cannot grow coffee at all, except in Hawaii. Aside from that, we can't grow coffee. So you're going to have more expensive coffee and worse coffee. The president of Argentina, he recently came in. He said, these tariffs are hurting our country. We have tons of tariffs. And yes, there are Argentinian manufacturers who are benefiting from this, but they're making terrible stuff. They're not making the best stuff, and they have no reason to make good stuff because we have tariffs in place that protect them. So they raise their prices as high as they can, and they give us terrible stuff. It's not helping the Argentinian people as a whole. It's just helping a few selected Argentinians. And he points out how corrupt tariffs are. Tariffs are corrupt. The reason they're corrupt is because big business loves regulations. Once a business gets big, it absolutely wants the government to come in place and set the rules. And the reason the big businesses want regulations in place is because it locks out all their competitors. It makes things too expensive to challenge them, to innovate against them. You've got to do this and this and this, and all of those things cost money. Maybe you're not even allowed to. For example, maybe you can produce whatever it is you want to produce outside the country in a different place, and that's cheaper. And these people happen to know more about building that thing. Well, you can't do it because the tariffs say that you have to do it in the United States, and you have to do it with these certain regulations. And just a great example of this. President Trump, he said, hey, we've got 10% tariff on everything in the world except for China. China, you're going to have to pay 155% tariff or whatever it is. And then like a week later, he comes out and says, yeah, the tariffs are in place against China because they're terrible and they're taking all our jobs. And we're going to keep those in place except for cell phones. Cell phones can come to the country without tariffs. Why cell phones? Of all the things that you're going to allow into the country without tariffs, that's one of the biggest ones. I thought you were trying to make money for the government by charging these tariffs. I thought you were trying to bring jobs into the country with these tariffs. And you're saying cell phones? One of the biggest things we import, one of the things we import the most? Cell phones? We're not going to tariff those? Well, clearly, somebody from the cell phone companies came to him and said, hey, man, if you put these tariffs on us, you're going to really hurt us. We can't do that. And look at all this money we happen to give to your inauguration fund and to your presidential campaign. So Trump carves out this exception for cell phones of all things. And eventually the exceptions don't make sense. They distort the economy. Eventually, you're saying that people who work in restaurants that don't bake bread should get paid more than people who work in restaurants who do bake bread. It doesn't make sense. The reason we don't have tariffs in place anymore is because we figured out that it was costing us a lot of money and it was costing the consumers a lot of money and we were getting worse stuff. And it was extremely corrupt. The big businesses, the people who wanted to make this thing or that thing, they knew that they could get into the ears of the legislatures with their money, either with actual bribes or with campaign contributions, and say, hey, you can stay in power, you can have this money, You just got to make an exception on these tariffs for this thing for us. And that's exactly what they did. They gave exceptions for these things, but not these things. They said it could come from here, but not from there. And people got rich while Americans got poor. Now, I talked about how in English gardens, the idea is to keep the predators out. Keep the weeds out, keep the moles out, keep the badgers and the wolverines, whatever. Keep them out. You want to protect the plants. In general, that's what we kind of have. In a free market economy, we figured out it can't be totally free. We need some barriers. We need some walls. We don't allow monopolies, for example. We don't allow one company to run the entire industry. We don't allow fraud. We require truth in advertising. If you say it's going to be this price, if you sign this contract, then you have to honor it. That's all about predators. That's all about keeping the predators out. One of those predators is national security risk. So we don't allow our defense needs, our weaponry and our fighter jets. We don't allow those to be built outside the United States. This seems perfectly reasonable to me. If we want to talk about not importing things from China because of the national security risk, that makes sense to me. If we want to talk about putting barriers to trade with Russia because of the way they're acting, and because we feel like it's interrupting our national interest, that makes sense to me. Those are predators. Great. I'm all in favor of it. Sometimes, though, we do need a little bit of French gardening. Let me start off with an example of one that I don't think we actually need. If you go into New Jersey or Oregon, you can't pump your own gas. You go to any gas station, somebody has to come out and pump your gas for you. It doesn't matter how long the line is. It doesn't matter how competent or mobile you are. You've got to sit there and wait for the guy to pump your gas, and it costs more. And the reason they do this in New Jersey and Oregon is because they want the jobs. They're like, hey, this is an easy way to make some jobs for people. We'll have people pump the gas. 48 other states, you can pump your own gas. In one way that I like French gardens, I was just at a gas station. I was at Costco Gas, and there was a sign on the gas dispenser, gas pump thing, that's what we call them. And it said, state law requires if you are disabled and no one is available to pump your gas for you, honk your horn several times until somebody comes out. Somebody has to come pump your gas for you. This is a French garden idea, and I'm all in favor of it. It makes sense. It makes no economic sense in the world to have somebody around to pump gas for a few disabled people that might come once a day or once a week or however often gas stations see them. It makes much more economic sense for a gas station to say, the disabled people, they should go somewhere else. I'm not really interested in serving them. I'd rather just make money off of the other 99.5% of the population. I'm not going to serve them. And the state here in California says, nope, we're doing a little bit of French gardening. We're saying you actually have to serve these people. It's going to cost you some more money, but we think it's good. Another place that's obvious is no discrimination. You can't discriminate against people for race or religion or gender identity. This seems to make very good sense to me because there are lots of people who might say this doesn't make economic sense for me. I'd rather not. And we're saying, no, you actually have to. You actually have to serve these people. We, as I talked about in a previous episode on socialism, we don't actually have a pure capitalist economy. And most places don't actually have a pure socialist economy. Everybody's got some mixed economy to one degree or another. And that's the same with this idea of free markets or English gardens or French gardens. There's a little bit of a mix of both in our system. I think we have to acknowledge that. We're all just debating about how much of it should be a French garden or should be an English garden. But I could be wrong. If you think I am, let me know. Let me know why. I had fun and I hope you did too. Bye-bye.
It might be you. It's the wrong podcast.